Thank you, Brian, for this opportunity, and thank you, Claudia, for really setting up the stage for the precarity of research careers and summarizing really well the challenges. I think I will reiterate multiple things that you said. So before I start, I wanted to say that I finished my PhD in 2009. I signed my first permanent contract in 2019, 10 years after I received my doctorate. I moved to 3 different countries and I signed multiple contracts in between. So I was thrilled to be a part of this expert group. So the recommendations I will present are really the work of a very devoted group of international experts, and coming from different research systems, I think that we all shared the firm belief that we can and must do better for our researchers. So actually there are 9 recommendations. I will, because I have limited time, I will only talk about 7 that I divided into 7 different categories. And for each category, I will talk about the guiding recommendation, and then I will talk about the sub-recommendations stemming from that guiding recommendation. And for each of these, I will give an example of a best practice. So we're starting with working conditions. The main factor underlying the precarity of postdocs is their employment status. Among those who are on fixed-term contracts, we see widely differing employment conditions depending on their funding. Some of them have employee status, but some of them don't. So they cannot benefit from basic welfare benefits like health benefits, social security, or pension rights. So we have to improve the working conditions of postdocs and make employment contracts the norm and limit the use of stipends. We have to ensure comparable salaries. What we see in some countries is that the pay is so poor that postdoctoral researchers have to hold multiple jobs to make the ends meet. And in other systems, what we see is that postdocs deliberately choose to work to have part-time jobs in order to devote part of their time for free to research. I think we should stop normalizing unpaid research work in academia. We have to ensure continuity by avoiding short-term contracts. So what we see right now across systems is that we have a succession of fixed-term contracts with intervals in between where researchers lose their benefits. We can say, you know, all postdoctoral contracts should be minimum 3 years. We have to create diversified open-ended positions. Now, in some systems, we have to, you cannot really increase the number of professors. You have to wait for someone to retire to replace that person, etc. But we can create hybrid positions between the PIs and the postdocs. And now we're seeing that in certain universities, they are called staff scientists, data stewards, research managers, senior researchers, etc. But what we see is that even for long-term and continuous needs, people tend to look for short-term contracts. So if you have a lab and if you need a lab manager, you don't need to change the lab manager every 2 years. We have to implement labor inspections of research performing organizations to compliance with existing, to make sure that they're compliant with existing labor legislation. Universities are not exempt from existing labor legislations. The PI cannot decide whether or not you can take your vacation. We have to offer more transparent, predictable, and flexible career prospects for postdoctoral researchers. As Claudia said, the postdoc phase is not really structured, but now there's a growing consensus that we should really structure it, and we need clear conditions for progression to have a permanent contract. In certain universities right now, what we see is that they established a research career framework for postdocs. So for instance, there's level 1 postdoctoral researchers for 4 years, and after that they define progression and key outcomes and expectations, and if you meet these expectations, then you go to level 2 and you become a research fellow, for instance. And then after 4 years you can become a senior research fellow. So there is a possibility to do that. Okay, example. A good example of working conditions is the NGAP program, the New Generation of Academics, coming from South Africa. Actually, the NGAP is a 6-year program. The first 3 years, you train to become a PhD, and the years 4 to year 6 is a career development phase. But what's really interesting about the NGAP program is that from the year 1, you know that you're going to become an academic if you meet certain criteria. So you're going to have a permanent position if you meet these evaluation criteria. And I really like the fact that they say in their ads, hold on one second, sorry, at least 80% of the positions will be allocated to Black and or women South African citizens. So there's also this aspect about diversity. Talent development and management. We have to offer broad professional development during postdoctoral training. So postdoc phase should be a stepping stone. We keep on saying that, but right now it's not. It should be a catalyst for career progression. We need to offer training beyond specialized research skills. Right now, there's a big push at the universities for transferable skills training, which is really good. We need mentoring programs, coaching, career guidance, placements in different sectors, collaboration, international exchanges, etc. We need to give time for professional development. I cannot emphasize this enough, because what we're seeing right now is that doctoral candidates, postdocs, and PIs think that they should devote 100% of their time to research. Of course, time should be devoted to research, but career development, it's not an add-on. It's a core requirement. It should be a core requirement for the PIs, and it should be an integral part of the doctoral and postdoctoral phase. And in the concordat that I will talk about, they say, we can give 10 days per year to researchers, for instance, for career development only. We have to support and regularly evaluate the career opportunities for researchers. They have to sit down and think, what's my plan A, what's my plan B, and what's my plan C? And they should start doing it as soon as possible, early in their career. The sooner is the better. Then, establish better links between research assessment and funding human research management policy objectives. Claudia was talking about funding with strings attached, and it's true, we can include evaluation criteria related to the quality of research environment and how it supports the career development of postdoctoral researchers, for instance, when we give funding. We can improve institutional practices regarding human resource management in research, promote and support the development of better human resource management practices in institutions, including recruitment, promotion to open-ended positions, performance assessment, professional development, and career guidance. For instance, about performance assessment, we can enact annual performance assessments for postdoctoral researchers. In many systems, postdocs receive no feedback on their performance, and there's no formal appraisal. Okay, so as an example, I have here the European Commission HR Excellence Award. As you know, in 2005, European Commission adopted the European Charter and Code, and the universities and institutions that commit to these principles can apply to get the HR Excellence Award, and they go through a systematic peer review assessment to get this logo. So they put in place multiple initiatives to be able to get this logo, which is quite positive. Okay, maybe I'm talking too fast. I'm going to slow down a little. Diversity and inclusion. So we have to promote equal opportunities, diversity, and inclusion in research careers by identifying and addressing existing biases and challenges. Enact transparent and open recruitment procedures for all contracts. So what we're seeing right now is that we have different recruitment strategies depending on the type of contract. In some countries, recruitment for postdoctorals is informal, and they're not even formally advertised, which raises the questions about academic inbreeding and raises issues about equal opportunities. We have to promote diversity through changes in institutional policies, processes, and culture to address barriers faced by underrepresented groups in research and development. So it's not enough to say we welcome women, we welcome underrepresented groups. You should welcome them, but at the same time, you should identify barriers to their full participation and try to remove these barriers. Right now, what we're seeing is that, all these factors like class, ethnicity, gender, parenting status have an overlapping effect. And since these groups cannot afford, as Claudia said, and endured a long period of precarity, we're losing diversity in academia. So as a good example, I have the Fix the Leaky pipeline coming from Switzerland. Fix the Leaky pipeline is a program that targets doctoral students and postdocs in STEM fields. And they're very active. They do courses, coaching, one-to-one mentoring, peer mentoring. And the idea is really to foster women's careers to achieve eventually gender equality. Okay. Promote intersectoral mobility of researchers. So right now at the Observatory, we're doing a study on non-academic employers that's called Recruiting Talents. And what I see for now is that 42% of non-academic employers tell us that PhD holders should have previous professional experience outside of academia to be hired within their institutions. So 42% of some 500, 600 employers is a lot of employers. And the question is, how can we give that experience while they are at the university? And the answer is we have to offer them work-based learning opportunities during doctoral education and postdoctoral training. Right now, countries are launching several initiatives such as PhDs in industry, fiscal incentives. Now there's a lot of encouragement to the creation of businesses by doctorate holders. These are all very good initiatives. And another barrier to the intersectoral mobility is this stigma, as Claudia said, about leaving academia. So there seems to be a stigma attached to it, and it's the researchers see themselves as failures, as failed researchers if they step out of academia. However, as Claudia said, we have evidence and multiple literature coming from different countries that show that these researchers, once they step out of academia, they have better working conditions, they're more likely to have permanent contracts, and they are satisfied. So we're thinking that we can counter these perceptions by publishing more evidence on the labor market outcomes of doctorate holders. Okay, MyTax. MyTax is an initiative coming from Canada that I really, really like. So this is when you go to MyTax page, you see this, I'm a business, I'm a not-for-profit, professor, postdoc, and student. And when you click postdoc, you will see multiple programs that are proposed to you. I will highlight the two of them. And I have to say that MyTax program is open not only to STEM fields, but to all fields, literature, philosophy, architecture, anything you wish, you can apply to it. So the first program is the MyTax Accelerate program. It's an internship. So as a postdoc, you apply, you write a proposal in collaboration with an organization and with your supervisor, and it's a 4-month paid internship, and you work at that organization. And the second program I wanted to highlight is the MTX Elevate. It's a 2-year postdoctoral fellowship where the researcher divides his time between the partner organization's project and the academic institution. They receive a salary, and not only that they receive a salary, they also have a professional development curriculum. They have classes on leadership, etc. International mobility. So as you know, international mobility comes with a lot of personal sacrifices because you lose your social support that arrives at a time that researchers want to start a family or enter the housing market, we have to support international mobility of researchers through different initiatives. And we have to also remove barriers to returning postdoctoral researchers. What we see is that some researchers that go abroad can no longer return to their home countries because they had lost the social network necessary to have access to certain positions. And it happens more often in systems where we see high levels of academic inbreeding. Improving the working conditions of international postdoctoral researchers is also very important, because what we see across several countries is that the working conditions for international students are often worse than the local students, the local researchers, and we have to lower barriers to their mobility by the recognition of qualifications, immigration rules, and portability of pension rights. Here, I wanted to give the example of ReSaver as a pension fund. I could not profit from that, but it's a very interesting scheme because it enables mobile researchers to remain affiliated with the same pension fund when moving between different countries, so you don't lose your pension rights. Okay. So evidence base, as Claudia said, we really lack data. We have, it's quite impressive how little we know about the whereabouts of doctorate holders. So we really should collect, analyze, and publish data on researchers, and on all researchers, not only the ones on permanent contracts, but the ones also who are on non-standard employment contracts. You know, the distribution of PhD holders in different sectors, their working conditions, their well-being, their employment status, the effects of significant global events like COVID, their mobility patterns, you know, incoming, outgoing, returning researchers. And as Claudia said, we need disaggregated data. Now we know about gender. We have some data on gender, but we lack a lot of data on, you know, socioeconomic status, ethnicity, academic age, country of origin, and disability. And we have to make statistics comparable across countries through set guidelines. So OECD has published the Frascati manual, the career of doctorate holder survey that we used as well in our study. So as an evidence base, a good example, of course, I'm going to talk about the Observatory of Research and Scientific Careers, where I work, because we started in 2019, and before we started, we really had very little data coming from the researchers in the French-speaking community of Belgium. There were some universities who did some studies, but when the grant ran out, the research stopped. And also these university-based studies were also based on very few universities, but not all universities. So when we started, we immediately launched a survey on doctorate holders, and now we keep on doing several different projects, and I think that it's to have longitudinal and systematic data is really important to understand the evolution of how things are changing. And the final recommendation is concerted and systemic action. Include all relevant stakeholders in the governance and coordination of research careers and ensure concerted and systemic action. Promote sector-wide agreements on academic research careers with the involvement of all stakeholders. So policymakers, research funders, institutions, researchers, trade unions, make them sign things. So it can be legally binding documents. It depends on the research context, but it can also be some unofficial concordats. It helps. And we have to give voice to postdoctoral researchers. As Claudia said, postdocs aren't a well-defined cohort of people. And across countries, we don't see postdoc associations. In our case, we don't have any national postdoc associations, or even based on institutions. To have these associations will give them voice and will create also an informal professional network for them. And a good example for that is the Concordat, to support the career development of researchers coming from Vitae. If you haven't read it, I really recommend you to read this. They have 3 defining principles: environment and culture, employment and profession and career development. And they target really 4 main stakeholders: researchers, managers of researchers, institutions, and funders. And for each of them, they're like, here's what you need to do. Here's what you need to do. You have to do this. And it's really well written. So what's next? What's next is that the Global Science Forum at OECD had a meeting in April, and countries agreed that we should follow up on this and launch a new project on PhD and postdocs, which targets PhD and postdoc training and ways to promote alternative and flexible career paths. So this work is starting as of next week, if I'm not mistaken. So the work will continue. So thank you very much for listening.